Greetings and salutations. This is Abe Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also visit us at patreon.com/The Bitter Truth, where you can become a bitter pill and get some bumper stickers and stuff like that. And, access to, stuff that we release on a semi-regular basis. But anyway, just talking about some of the things that last few weeks I've been interviewing some folks, and something that kind of hit me, and I'm going to call this this little entry passing the smell test. We're coming into the election season, primary season. It's 2019, but already everyone is throwing their hat into the ring, and they're wanting to run and blah blah blah. And I'm already seeing the United States media, the corporate-run, state-run media, which is what I call it because it's no different than, say, the old Eastern Bloc. I mean, you get the sanitized, CIA-approved, mother-tested jargon that it's like the new McCarthyism, as Ron Balcone said. Some call it McCarthyism, I call it a comeback. But yeah, I mean, just let's just take. I'm gonna take a couple of simple examples. I mean, we're not gonna be too long today, but I'm gonna talk about a couple of people and how we kind of ignored the smell test just because they were on your side, and then I'm gonna get into some bigger picture stuff, if that makes sense. And I'm gonna start off with Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris threw her hat into the ring on Martin Luther King Day, which I thought was interesting because. I can tell you this: Martin Luther King did not call fucking Goldman Sachs to get cash, for his poor people's campaign. So there's that. Kamala Harris is a horrible, horrible attorney general of California. She ran against a guy when I was living there named Steve Coogan, Republican for attorney general, who was an LA district attorney for a while. And he actually ran to the left of Kamala Harris. Doesn't that sound eerily familiar? Who else ran to the left of somebody who was supposed to be a Democrat? Donald fucking Trump ran to the left of Hillary Clinton, and I'll get into that in a minute. But let's just stay with Kamala Harris. So as Attorney General, and because everyone's like, oh my God, she's black and she's a woman, and she has such a great track record. Actually, she's 2 years in the Senate, same time as Obama. And if you remember how well the Hope and Change bullshit went last time, let me remind you, he had a shitty, anemic Senate voting record too. Pro-corporate, not for the people, talked shit in 2008, did exactly what the corporations wanted him to do when he became president. Kamala Harris is the same person. No different than Cory Booker, by the way, or Kirsten Gillibrand, or even Elizabeth Warren, who's awesome at chastising people in public, and then, pretty much goes along with 26 federal circuit court judges under the Trump administration and Neil Gorsuch, and just barely fights Brett Kavanaugh because he's basically accused of rape. I don't really have a lot of faith in Elizabeth Warren, and her foreign policy sucks. But let's just stay with Kamala Harris for a hot second, for the third time I'm saying that. As Attorney General, she was sued by the federal government 3 times to alleviate prison overcrowding. Now, if you understand the national statistics, half of all prisoners in state and federal prisons are there because of drug charges, 90% of whom are not drug runners or traffickers. They were busted for personal use. Excuse me. So the guy that got nailed with a little bit of coke in his car gets treated like, El Chapo, right? So she was sued 3 times to let those folks go to alleviate prison overcrowding. Didn't do it, right? She was pro-death penalty still. Even though 4% of the people we kill are innocent. That's the national statistic. And I don't mean against the death penalty, like we're never going to do it, but at least suspending it and or rewriting the system under which we try people. Because let's be honest, there's a 4-to-1 ratio of blacks to black and brown people to non-black and brown people that are facing the death penalty. So you got to be basically a mass murderer to get to the death penalty. Like one out of 4 people on death row are white. The rest are all black and brown people. So what does that say? Does that say that, more of those folks commit crimes? Maybe. But more than likely, they're tried erroneously. Stuff's pumped up. Meanwhile, some guy that killed his wife Gets probation because he's a white businessman who, just went awry. The marriage went south. So she had no problem pushing for the death penalty when we got a 4% wrongful conviction, like not wrongful conviction, but they were convicted, so wrongfully convicted. But we have a 4% error where people are being killed that didn't do it, the innocent people. So we have to suspend that. She was against suspending that. As a San Francisco district attorney, she was not for the poor. She was not for the homeless. She was not for the persons of color. And now she's on her stupid commercial talking about democracy and values. I am so sick and tired of people buying into that happy horseshit. It sounds almost like Beto O'Rourke again, or 2.0 Obama. Julian Castro is running for president. I'm in Texas, so he's kind of a bigger deal here. You probably don't even know who he is if you're listening in New York, but he's going to run. And he had one good week of speeches where somebody kind of kicked his ass a little bit, and he actually started talking like a progressive, but I don't believe it because he was the HUD secretary under Obama. So again, what's his past going to be? Is it going to, is it prologue? I mean, let's look at this, for example. Only 3 Democrats has spoken out against the coup in Venezuela. Ro Khanna, Tulsi Gabbard, and this nice Muslim woman whose name escapes me right now. But of all the Democrats in the Senate and the Congress, Bernie, pro-coup. We got to fight for the rights of the people, and we got to make sure that they get democracy. Fuck you, man. Let's go into Saudi Arabia. Listen, anytime. Here's your smell test, and here's the emotional and intellectual honesty that I'm asking you to apply to everything. If you hear about another regime change, I don't want to hear about another fucking regime change until we invade goddamn Saudi Arabia, okay? We take out Saudi Arabia and we steal their oil, like I see every fucking right-wing asshole talking about us stealing Venezuela's oil with a democratically elected government. But it's okay to say that shit and then go ahead and ignore Saudi Arabia? That is not even close to a democracy. Women are killed for wanting to get the right to drive and protesting as such. Gays are killed in Saudi Arabia. Why aren't we invading that fucking country, taking their fucking oil? Oh, because they sell it to us cheap. That's why. Venezuela, they don't do that. They nationalized their oil. And if you want to hear about a regime change, and anytime you hear about regime change, it's always, if you follow the dollar, it's always with a country that's not playing ball with American industry. Iran, they're a dictatorship. What's Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia is a bunch of assholes who sell us their oil cheap. Iran won't do it. Iran won't let us nationalize their oil. That's why they're pissed. The United States is pissed at them. They kicked out the Shah in '79, who played ball with American oil. No different than Salvador Allende playing ball with American copper. Not wanting to play ball with American copper, and then having us get rid of him and put in Augusto Pinochet, who was a general in the Chilean army. And he went ahead and played ball with American copper. Got about $300,000 a year in a Cadillac. If you know your 80s alternative rock, there was this great band called Camper Van Beethoven. And they had a great song called General Pinochet's Cadillac. It was awesome. And talked about this very subject. So back to Kamala Harris. She also refused to not even indict. She didn't even investigate. Her investigators came to her after the housing crash with 1,000 cases of fraudulent mortgage foreclosures by a company called One West Bank, which not a famous name, but it was run by a guy named Steve Mnuchin, who is now the current Secretary of the Treasury. One West Bank was a subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. Guess who refused to not even investigate those 1,000 cases, even though her investigators said we got 1,000 more of those cases? She didn't even investigate. She refused to indict. And why? Because she was on the phone to Goldman Sachs and everybody else getting money for her future Senate campaign, which she ran. She's been a senator now for 2 years. Like I said earlier, with an anemic, pro-corporate, shit voting record. I watched a clip of her on YouTube about a year ago where she pretended not to know what single-payer health care was. This is your Democratic Party, folks. And by the way, Those of you that are Republicans going, yeah, he's right. Fuck you too, because the Republican Party is not your friend either. These parties are not your friend. We have experienced a corporate coup d'etat in slow motion, okay? And until we reverse that, doesn't seem like we're going to, because they now own the media, we're going to get more of the same shit. And if you guys think that there's a good guy, bad guy, I just had Adrian Botarello on the show recently, and he made this really great point. There is no good guys and bad guys. We've got one big business party with two wings. One is the sort of right wing that they don't like abortion and they don't like gay people. The other is the sort of left wing and they like abortion and they like gay people. But the problem with all of those people and both those wings is they take money from the same corporate motherfuckers that have us into every Vietnam all over the world. Libya, lost that. Iraq, got our asses kicked there. By the way, if you don't know this, we are getting our asses handed to us in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Iraq. We are not winning there. That's why we're in Afghanistan now for 17 years. Actually going on 18 years. This fall, it will be 18 years. So if your kid was born when we went in Afghanistan, he is now old enough to fight in Afghanistan. Sleep tight. So there's your Kamala Harris, basically. I know I went all over a little bit, but whatever. Because, that's how Donald Trump was sort of able to fly over, below the radar. His followers refuse to acknowledge that 6 bankruptcies as a businessman doesn't mean you're smart. It means you're a fucking asshole and you don't know how to run business. But when you inherit $400 million from your dad and he shifts it over to you illegally through tax dodges and everything else, what do you expect? And how does anybody justify this guy? Now, if you voted for him in 2016, when people were hurting, and the Obama administration had ignored those people, and most of those states that Trump took voted for Obama twice. In fact, all of those states that Trump took voted for Bernie in the primary. I want to make this really clear to you. Understand this. They voted for Bernie in the primaries, but they didn't vote for Hillary in the general election. I'll say that again. They voted for Bernie in the primaries, but then they voted for Trump. And why was that? Because he ran to the left of Hillary. He ran an anti-interventionist, pro-American jobs, pro-healthcare campaign. He acknowledged that the ACA was a failure. He acknowledged that the Obamacare plan was nothing but a big wet kiss to corporate insurance and corporate pharma. Of course, he gets in there because he's a fucking liar. He didn't do any of that stuff. In fact, he tried to make the shitty plan even worse. And his base are still with him. And I'm just complaining and I'm just a whiner. Yeah. If you're listening to this show and you don't like me, great. Go fuck yourself. I don't care. So, but the point I'm making about Trump is the same kind of point I was making about Kamala Harris earlier, is he failed the smell test, but his base refused to acknowledge that he smelled. He's been bankrupt 6 times. He defrauded contractors. He has ran businesses into the ground that he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to. Trump Casino. How do you fuck up a casino? That went bankrupt twice and finally closed down a few years back before he ran. Failed university, failed steak business. I mean, he's got a couple of cool golf courses. And most of that, I don't believe that the Russiagate election thing is true. But I do believe he's guilty of quite a few financial irregularities that we would not consider normal in doing business, especially when you're doing business with the Russian mob, which that's not a secret. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's fact. And, as far as the election goes, not one single indictment or conviction or piece of evidence has shown anything. In fact, a couple of weeks back, the Huffington Post said, Mueller's got him. And then the next day, we don't got him. There's been like 15 of those reports that came out that have said, we got him in the last 2 or 3 years, and then we don't got him. So on the election thing, we don't got him. On everything else, we got him. But his base chooses to willfully ignore that. And so that's how come we get that. That is how the American people are so easily duped. I just took Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, brought out their frailties, their weaknesses, and I can tell you right now, both sides are calling me an asshole. How dare you say that about Trump? Oh, you're divisive if you say that about Kamala Harris. She's awesome. Why? Why is she awesome? Why is he awesome? Pointing out someone's record, by the way, is not racist. It's not sexist. It's pointing out their record. Kamala Harris is who she is. I don't care if she's a white guy with a penis. That is who she is. Okay? She was a shitty attorney general. She's been a shitty, mediocre at best senator who's a pro-corporate tongue bather who supports every piece of shit foreign war that we're in. And just like everybody else in the Democratic Party, she's totally okay with us unilaterally declaring a guy who didn't even run for president of a country to be president of a country. That's how ridiculous we've gotten. And so getting into Venezuela, again, the smell test. What does Venezuela have? Why are we so interested in Venezuela? They got oil, the largest oil reserve in the world. Now, why have they, quote unquote, failed as an economy? There's a lot of reasons. 105 sanctions might be part of that. Also, they've never been a real socialist government. If you want to talk about reality and getting into a smell test, look at everything. Don't just listen to Fox News or goddamn MSNBC and sit there and say, oh, yeah, well, they're failed part. Because socialism works in most of the countries that it's in. And well, by the way. And a parliamentary system over what we have works incredibly well, by the way. But when you keep watching the American media, which is basically state-run media, because Comcast takes their money from the CIA, Amazon, who owns the Washington Post, has a $600 million deal with the CIA in a consulting agreement so that the CIA can be more media savvy. That's the pitch. But of course, it's emotionally and intellectually, dishonest to assume that if I'm giving you $600 million, you're not going to do what I ask you to do, which is to report the news as I fucking tell you how to do it. New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, they're owned by Comcast. HBO, Time Warner. Isn't it amazing how Bill Maher is such a right-wing Democrat now, punching from the right, believing the Mueller shit. You think he believes that crap? No, but Time Warner was the number 9 contributor to Hillary Clinton and her campaign in 2016. So, of course, Bill Maher is going to play ball because that's his fucking boss, and he makes quite a few $1 million a year from that, and it allows him to also go on the road as a stand-up comic and ensure his popularity to sell out stadiums, or at least big theaters, all over the country, which he does. So again, digress, but getting back to Venezuela, look at the regime change rhetoric and look at how many times we've said that and how many times it fails. Libya, failed state. Iraq, failed state. Afghanistan, we've been bombing those guys for going on 18 years, all for lithium and opium. And isn't it interesting how the late 90s, the opium industry with the pharmaceutical companies was getting really going, especially with Purdue. And then 9/11 happens, and Afghanistan, who had nothing to do with 9/11, it was Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, according to the 9/11 Commission. If you want to say that I'm a conspiracy person, that I'm out of my mind, the 9/11 Commission that was commissioned by the United States government said that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia were the main actors in 9/11. The ringleader, Osama bin Laden, we thought he was in Afghanistan, and then it turned out he was hiding in Pakistan for a lot longer than we thought. But we still went in Afghanistan and Iraq, the two countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. And yet here we are, 18 years later, and going on all this bullshit about human rights with Venezuela. When we give a shit about human rights, we support 73% of the world's dictators until they don't play ball with us. Why is it that Colombia, who does play ball with U.S. industry, coffee, bananas, sugar, for example, they just got admitted to NATO? Isn't that interesting? So now they're a NATO nation. So now the U.S. can have bases in Colombia, have a beachhead in Colombia, which is right next door to Venezuela, and attack Venezuela. And for what? Human rights? Colombia is rife with corruption and human rights. I mean, I've had people on my Facebook, people that I grew up with. Well, you're ignoring Venezuela's corruption. They're a corrupt government. Colombia's corrupt as fuck. Unless you haven't been there. It's no different than going to Mexico. If you've been to Mexico, corrupt as shit. And guess what the cops do? The cops do what the cops do. It is pretty grim what the cops do. So anyway, no different. But we ignore what we don't want to see because it's easier for us to do that. And so we don't acknowledge that there are other countries Bolsonaro in Brazil, who just won the election, a total right-winger, is already stripping Brazilians of their rights and social programs. And some of you listening to this would go, well, what does that matter? Why should they have social programs? Why should we have social programs? It's not the government's job to profit. It's the government's job to revenue enough to serve their taxpayer. I'll say that again. It's the government's job to revenue enough to serve the taxpayer. Otherwise, why are you paying taxes? For what? I would gladly pay a few bucks more a year to make sure that I've got Medicare for all and college for free, which, by the way, college was free when I went to school. My cousin, who's in his 60s, went to UCLA for free. He went to UCLA Law School for free. Again, when you talk about the smell test, I don't want a pony. This is how it was. And some of my more conservative friends that knew me in college, and I knew them, we went to Cal Poly Pomona together. Guess what, motherfucker? You paid $100 a quarter to go to Cal Poly, the same as me. And now it's $5,000 a quarter, and you're okay with that? What kind of happy horse shit are you buying into that's not been dictated to you by the CIA? Seriously. So we look at Venezuela with not critically at all, with no critical thinking at all. The government tells us they're socialist. Oh, the guy just declared himself president of Venezuela. And 80% of the country is like, okay, well, I guess they're having problems, so he declared himself the president. Donald Trump is a fucking asshole. I don't want anybody declaring themselves president of the United States without a goddamned election. And how dare we tell a democratically elected leader, whether we like him or not, that he's got 8 days to have democratic elections? Or what are we going to do? Invade them? If you're listening to this and your kid is in the military, I'll tell you right now, your kid is dying for nothing. And if you don't have a kid in the military and you think it's okay to go into Venezuela, fuck you. Grab a gun, you go. I'm sick and tired of creating a caste system. When Nixon got rid of the draft, I thought it was cool. Looking back on it now, well, not so much. We had Vietnam protests because the middle class were dying in that fucking war. Now that the poor and black and brown are dying in that war, those wars, we're in 8 now, pretty soon 9 if you count Venezuela, nobody seems to mind. Are we still in Libya? Are we still in Iraq? Are we? I meet people all the time who don't even know we're in wars. They have no idea that we're collectively carpet bombing 8 countries right now. They don't. But then they'll watch TV. Or my favorite bit, and I'm going to wrap up here in a little bit because this isn't going to be very long like I promised you. I just want you to apply a smell test. Because if it's emotionally and intellectually dishonest to assume that someone is going to do something just because they took money and that, well, they took the money, but that doesn't mean they're going to do something or not do something. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. This is about oil. That's it. It's about the largest reserve of oil, and the country's not playing ball with us. So we're trying to knock them out so that Exxon and the Koch brothers and Standard Oil can all make a profit, obscene profits, while we pay this new knothead about $500,000 a year and a Cadillac. These banana republic dictatorships, that's how they run. And we're trying to take Venezuela and turn them into Libya. But without the 40 terror groups that sell Yemeni slaves and sell the oil on the black market. We're trying to control that, which we're not doing in Libya right now, by the way. So I digress. I want you to apply a smell test. Whenever you see something or hear something, why don't you ask yourself, Venezuela? Huh, that's weird. Dictatorship, violation of human rights. Why aren't we invading Saudi Arabia then? Why aren't we sanctioning Israel? Fuck, they have 60% of the world's drone sales. And where do they test those drones? On people in the Gaza Strip. Oh, that's impossible. Not really. In 2005, Israel cleared out 9,000 Jewish settlers out of the Gaza Strip by force and put them into Israel proper and got them some nice pads to live in. And why? So they can collectively carpet bomb Gaza anytime they fucking want to. And by the way, Israel trains police forces in the United States by showing them, hey, this is what we do in Gaza for crowd control. This is what we do in Gaza with tear gas. This is what we do in Gaza. The only thing we don't teach our cops here is live rounds. So as a for instance, when people on the Gaza Strip, Palestinians were coming to the gate to protest, and they were getting shot by snipers from 100 yards away, which is a bullshit coward move, but whatever. And I was told, well, that shouldn't go to the fence. Okay. You know what would happen in this country if a Black Lives Matter protest was met with live rounds and people were being murdered by police? We would have 20 cities on fire like it was the 60s. That's what would happen. Again, here's your smell test. Why is it okay to kill civilians somewhere else, but we would never do it here? Why is it okay for some guy to declare himself president who didn't even run in an election, but we don't question it? England's cool with it. Spain's cool with it. United States. These pussy-ass Democrats are sitting there going on about Russiagate and all this bullshit. Election fraud. Yet they want to overthrow a democratically elected leader. Let me make this really quick point, and then I'm going to start wrapping up. It doesn't matter whether you like them or not. It doesn't matter whether you agree with them or not. If it was a democratically held election, here's a great example. Saddam Hussein, who was our boy for a while before he wasn't, was winning elections by 99%, by actually executing his opposition, by actually rigging the ballot boxes. But he was our guy. So we didn't even say boo. We didn't start paying attention to the fact that he won these elections criminally until he became not our guy. Then we started paying attention and making fun of the fact that he won elections by like 99%. Praise Allah, right? So all that to say, again, you got to ask yourself, does it pass the smell test? And is it emotionally and intellectually honest to assume that this horrible regime in Venezuela, for example, and I'm not going to say they're this great government because, they got their problems. But if they were such a dictatorship and so abhorrent and ignorant and reckless toward the rule of law, I believe that Guaido is staying in the Colombian embassy right now. They would visit him, invade the embassy, because what? If you're going to break one law, break them all, right? If you're a regime that is just a banana republic dictatorship, as the Venezuelan government is portrayed as in the U.S. media, then why aren't they just invading the Colombian embassy and starting a war with fucking Colombia? Not like they don't have weapons, right? Because it's bullshit. And the American people buying into this is the height of ignorance. And it's because you choose to be dumb on purpose. You're in a country and in a time where information is just right there at your fingertips. Anything you want to see. If you type in anything into Google, for example, type in the phrase, Democrats that are okay with the Colombian or the Venezuelan coup, a ton of articles will come up from sources that you've heard of, sources you haven't heard of, but you'll see it and you can maybe formulate an opinion that's not dictated to you by the U.S. media, which is CIA tested and mother approved, right? You'll be able to actually get some facts and actually ask yourself some real questions. Those are the filters that I'm asking you to apply. And I know I kind of went all over the place a little bit, and it's a Saturday, and by the time you hear this, it'll be probably a few weeks from now. But as we move into the primary season, just know that we're going to probably get into a couple of more international skirmishes. How we frame those skirmishes. Oh, Venezuela's a corrupt government. We need to get rid of it. They need to go. Really? And Colombia doesn't need to go? Saudi Arabia doesn't need to go? Iraq doesn't need to go? Iraq is still a joke. Afghanistan is still a joke. Still the number one producer of opium in the world. They run a serious heroin trade in addition to supplying the United States pharmaceutical companies with all the opium they need. And what, 70% of opium overdoses in this country are from the pharmaceutical companies, not street-level heroin? That should tell you something, right? If you want to see where people are suffering and how to fix it, follow the dollar. See who benefits? It's that old Latin phrase, cui bono, who benefits, right? And fix that. And quit watching fucking TV. And as I wrap up, again, we're on patreon.com/thebittertruth. You can subscribe and be a bitter pill. You can also listen to us absolutely free on iTunes and YouTube and Stitcher and Spotify and everything else. And as I wrap up, if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, guys, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.